Welcome to another episode. I am here with Derek. We're going to talk about energy efficiencies, commercial real estate developments, also mindset, and what goes into building great companies. Without any further ado, Derek, why don't you introduce yourself and the company you represent? We'll kick it off with that.
Hey, Matt. Good to see you again. Thanks so much for the opportunity here. I love these kind of conversations, get a lot out of them. Enjoy talking at this level and hopefully providing something that is interesting for others. Derek Hansen, co-founder, current CEO of MYNT Systems. We're a clean energy developer and contractor. Think of a design build, all things clean energy, focused entirely on the industrial real estate space. So in some cases, we're working with commercial real estate investors and owners to take a strategic approach to bringing clean energy through their real estate holdings portfolio. In some cases, we're working with groups that are in the process of developing a ground up new facility and how to embed things like microgrid or in the current case, we're talking about solar plus battery storage plus EV charging for their fleets, for their delivery trucks and how that all ties together and works. And beginning with the end in mind, working with the planning and construction teams to design something that will be really, really useful and effective. And in some cases, we're just working for capital groups that are specifically focused on deploying capital into the clean energy space, where they're looking for what's the industry calls an EPC, which is engineering, procurement, and construction, just a group to take their kind of early stage plan set and put a price on it and then go build it. And so we are what might be considered a vertically integrated firm, everything from working with capital on how to strategically implement, as a developer. So finding opportunities for that capital to be deployed and creating those strategies and working with a particular site to develop a project, all the way down to the hard engineering and boots on the ground construction. So we're a diverse group here. It's pretty rare to be this vertically integrated. It was more than 10 years worth of really, really hard work of reinvesting in the company and establishing teams that are as sophisticated as ours in a kind of an interdisciplinary way. But it's played out to be it was a smart bet. We had a big idea early on and we hoped that we were headed in the right direction where the market was headed. And it did play out to be that way.
That explains why your section on your website, by the way, fantastic website. I have to highlight it every time we speak because that website stands out for sure. That's the section of the website where you share your team is an endless scroll. I was going through my iPad. There's so many team members, but I can imagine how many brains and hands-on you need for all those projects to go smoothly. Sometimes pause if I saw.
Yeah. There's a whole row of office dogs who have these interesting titles like chief observation officer and head of security and whatever. It's super fun. We keep it light. It's real serious work and we work hard and play hard, but we find that everybody has, some of us more than others, creative side, but everybody needs to get that itch scratched a little bit. And I think having some dogs running around the office and things like that makes it a lot easier to do the hard work.
It's always a good sign. Someone told me that in the past where there's a dog either in a household, in an office, or I had a dermatologist who had 3 dogs in his office. It always makes it immediately like a warm environment. And there's like, you're dealing with good humans because, dogs, and if you have cats, different story.
There's different studies that I've seen that are like, people's heart rate drop, blood pressure drops immediately around, our animal friends.
Yeah. There's this David Hawkins. I don't know if you read any of his books.
Oh yeah. All of them.
The frequencies, of we radiate, it's immediate. And I know it firsthand. I mean, I grew up with dogs. I have a dog, always had a dog. And every time you have a bad day, you just get around your dog.
Nothing better than coming home to somebody that's that excited to see you.
Right?
For me, I can't even start my truck in the morning without my dog, howling and running around looking for his leash because he's got to get in the truck with me first thing in the morning.
I love it. That's the same here. So I was happy to see that as well. And obviously, you were born, you grew up knowing exactly you're going to run an energy efficiency company, get into commercial real estate, big developments. So how did
I got to figure out how to distill this down. I get asked this question a lot. And, how did you end up where you're at? And I could take you down the long, winding road that I love Steve Jobs' quote, super simple, but it's, you can always connect the dots looking backwards. It's very difficult to connect dots looking forward. So looking back, it makes a lot of sense how I ended up here. However, at the time, I think I've always been driven by, and I've done a lot of recently done a lot of kind of personal reflection on as the company's grown and my role has expanded to allow me a lot more time to work on the company and less necessity in the company, and therefore being more strategic and planning on where we're going, directional kind of approaches, where the market's headed, where the policies are headed, things like that. It's given me time to also look at where my highest best use is for this company in its future. And I've been able to distill down my personal core purpose, right? Which ultimately boils down to some version of inspiring positive change. And if I look back, even at my young years, I've always been heavily interested in like paradigm shift, in things being different. Yes, better, but ultimately different. Where are we missing that thing that's hidden in plain sight? Tony Robbins talks a lot about identifying what it is you should be doing now with your life and your career by looking at what you wanted to be when you were a kid, right? And if I look back at my earliest memories, I wanted to be a geologist at one point, and I was really fascinated by cool rocks and gems and things like that. And what does that mean now? Well, I look back and say, well, I'm really interested in uncovering the unseen and presenting it as like, look what's there. I studied architecture in school and was fascinated by design and really wanted to be an architect, and worked for an architectural firm for a while as a kind of a low-level intern. But why did I want to be an architect? Well, I really wanted to look at different ways of utilizing space and different materials and different ways of changing the experience of everyday life. So that's some of where I ended up where I'm at. But ultimately, I grew up around a company that was founded by my dad. Started very small. He bootstrapped it for, and I literally grew up with it for 20 years before I joined the company, after exploring architecture and then eventually exploring this construction space. My dad talked me into coming back to his company and joining him there. And of course, my dad, being an old school guy, was like, come back to the company. It's going to be great. Someday you'll have an opportunity to run things. And by the way, start at the very bottom. So over the course of, somewhere around 18 years, I worked my way up from role to role, where I learned every kind of position throughout the company and spent a lot of time in sales and business development, but that had been preceded by being out on the crews and then learning how to manage our crews and then manage multiple projects at once, and then moving into sales and business development and building relationships with targets in the market, and learning my craft and studying the old sales guys like Brian Tracy and Tony Robbins and those, just self-education. I dropped out of college my first year just because I couldn't stand the idea of sitting in a classroom for another 4 or 5 years. And so I wanted to get out there and make some money. And of course, that was the backdrop of growing up around entrepreneurial parents. It came naturally to me to want to get out there and work and start on my career. So in a nutshell, that was company was in the glazing industry. It was aftermarket coatings, high performance coatings for glass. That as the company grew, as we developed broader markets, we got pulled into a lot of large scale energy efficiency conversations with corporate facilities about how to reduce energy consumption. And what happens with glaze is that if you reduce the amount of thermal load on a building, the amount of heat coming in the building through the glass, you reduce the cost of cooling that building. And so there's a very simple kind of quotient there. But ended up acting as a consultant for national energy efficiency companies, specific to the glazing component. And that gave me a viewpoint on at the time they were called ESCOs, or energy services companies, and they were packaging a number of different technologies and components into a package for their clients that was ultimately about reducing operational cost for the facility. And I thought, this is great, but they're operating at such a massive scale. It was government, municipalities, corporate campuses. And my kind of aha moment came when I would be walking through these facilities, and the facilities manager, property owner, whoever it might be, would go, "Hey, do you know anybody that does, lighting retrofits? You know anybody that does HVAC optimization? I know you're the glass guy, but we love working with you guys. Could you?" And I thought, man, all I got to do is find the right people and put them all together, and I could have that same kind of a comprehensive, holistic approach to energy efficiency, but more for the mid-market, this kind of underserved, largest segment of the market, but the most underserved. The lower end of the spectrum was residential, where there was a lot of people speaking to homeowners about what they could do to improve their energy costs, reduce energy costs. And of course, again, at the very top level, these massive corporate campuses and government buildings and such, but nobody was talking to that mid-market commercial space. And I thought, well, if I could do that same thing in that segment, it would probably gain some traction. So that was the genesis of the idea, and a number of years of working out kinks in the idea while I was still helping to grow the family business to a point at which it was sellable. And that meant building systems and processes and a market share that was big enough to be sustainable, and also a big enough company to where when it sold, my parents could retire comfortably. And so that was the goal at the time. So, this is my recommendation to anybody that is potentially looking at the entrepreneurial route, maybe young folks out there. You got to do both. You can't just, it's not as easy as just quitting one thing and go start another. You got to do both at the same time. So I was working on my dream while earning a living, helping to kind of put a bow on my parents' dream, right? Which was to be able to raise a family and stay in a beautiful place like Santa Cruz, California, and then eventually retire. And so by the time I kind of was finalizing my business plan and my concept, we were able to sell my parents' company, and I was able to kind of bridge that into raising some capital, a little bit of seed capital to start what is now MYNT Systems. But it was a number of years prior to that I had begun working on the idea. I have photos, whiteboards from 15 years ago that were kind of mapping out what is now really a reality here in the market.
Wow, what a story! Share those if you have those pictures, videos, share it with the world. Put it on YouTube somewhere. I mean,
they will go up. So our YouTube channel is being built out right now. I recently, this last year, hired a brilliant filmmaker, a storyteller, marketing brand strategist, brilliant young guy, Steve Cassingham, who has a long history of doing great filmmaking documentaries in the sustainability space. And he came on full time in the last 6 months. And so he's building out a really cool YouTube channel. We've decided that's where everything is going to go. So if anybody's interested in seeing some of the story, it's live, and I just recorded another video this morning for it. There's project stories. There's I've got a radio show. There's clips from that. There's a lot of cool stuff there that tells the story that's about what MYNT does in the market, but it's also about the kind of behind the scenes, the culture. I believe that culture comes first in a good business. And I believe that, one of the concepts that I held very tightly to in starting this company was that this company could certainly be a vehicle for transformation in the market, a different way of doing things, a better way of doing things in the sustainability space. But I also wanted the company to represent a vehicle for personal transformation and growth for each and every person that chose to join us. And so that required that the culture come first, right? That first and foremost, we protect a culture that fosters growth and innovation and creativity, that we are always living into the positive sum mentality, right? Where it's win-win as opposed to somebody's got to lose in order for somebody else to win. And so I'm kind of imbuing this company with that culture and making sure that that's always first and foremost for us has allowed us to remain true to our mission as we continue to grow, and now to a national scale.
That's what I love about entrepreneurship, that you are able to build something that allows you to bring on people like you've mentioned on projects that you're going to work on. And that's exciting. I'll make sure that we'll have that link down below the video as well, so people can discover it, viewers can discover that channel as well. And I look forward to seeing that too. And just to not make company culture a buzzword out there, what role does culture play in the decision-making for you process, for you when it comes to hiring, bringing people onto the team, maybe partners as well? Where does culture come into this equation?
Yeah, it's not an easy thing to make it the backbone of everything you do, but it really does have a strong ROI to it. So for instance, in looking at new candidates, where up until real recently, I was almost always the primary recruiter. I would bring other people into the conversation, help with decision making around hiring, but it was something I loved to do and something that I felt was important that I do, because again, I'm pulling in another cell into the organism. Is it a healthy cell? Is it a cell that's going to increase the proficiency, the efficiency, the productivity of the organism, or is it going to detract, right? And a good culture acts a lot like a healthy organism in that it will bring in and foster and nurture the right thing, but it will very quickly reject and spit out a foreign, deleterious, let's say, body. And so when it comes to hiring, as an example, to answer your question, we are almost placing cultural fit over skills and experience. I would say we are. They're all contemplated, in parallel. Skills and experience come with time or can be taught. We're looking more at some core ingredients that fit the culture. And so it's not easy to say, does it fit the current culture, or is this going to be accretive to the evolution of the culture, right? And so the idea being some basic questions about what makes that person tick. what is it that they're looking for in their life? What makes them truly happy? Things that aren't necessarily about the capability of performing the role that we have. The other aspect of this is having the ability to say, this person can fill this role that we're looking to fill right now. And we want to make sure that we have an ongoing conversation with that person in order to help them migrate into another part of the company that may be a better fit over time. So it's a little bit like get in where you fit in, but then that's not the end of the road, right? It's not a commodity concept. It's a little bit like it's an entry point or an on-ramp into what could become a bigger conversation. A lot of times I have an example of a guy that we hired early on as an engineer. He had an engineering background, engineering education. We brought him in as an engineer, and over time, it became very apparent that he wanted to be and would be very good at business development. Those are typically two ends of opposite ends of a spectrum in personality type, and yet that's what occurred. Now, had we pigeonholed him into the engineering role, after a certain amount of years, he's going to get burnout. He's not going to be adding to the culture. He's going to be stressed probably or possibly. But by having this ongoing conversation about what excites him, what parts of his job does he not like, what parts of his job does he love, and using that as to inform where it is that we might be better utilizing his quote unquote superpowers. Oh. And so that's another part of what we're always doing is looking at people. We have a number of personality profile assessments that we give people. And then we analyze and we discuss with them, and we use that as kind of a backdrop for an ongoing conversation with them that helps us identify what their innate superpowers are. And we spend a lot of time doubling down on people's superpowers and very little time trying to help them bring up their weaknesses. Because as we've all heard, one man's treasure is another man's trash. Well, the same thing goes for people in their natural drivers. One person's weaknesses is another person's strengths. And so if you build teams in that concept, you end up with a dynamic culture naturally. But then there's the basics of are they the kind of people that enjoy having dogs running around the office? Things like that, right? And so as you build culture at the center point and focus of your company, what happens is it becomes less about an organization and more about an organism, and this living, breathing organism that has a life of its own, that just needs to be fed and nurtured and directed. But ultimately, it becomes more synergistic. The people act in a more symbiotic way, and the outcomes are compounded.
I love the analogy, not to get into too much into anatomy, because that's not my forte, but it immediately brought out this picture of two scenarios. One is a feast. You feed the organism. There's a lot of food available, and you see what will grow on it, because you have certain cells essentially that will grow because you feed them. They're in good environment and they thrive on it and they can grow. And on the other side, you have the technical term here is autophagy, where it usually happens when you're fasting, when your body's recycling those cells that are not as strong as the others, and survival of the fittest type of environment. But they're still cells that survive that moment. They stay with you, and that obviously in that organism.
Culture does that automatically, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I was leading to. That's actually a really good analogy there. Yeah, you could teach it at one.
I love it. Yeah. No, I get the opportunity to chat on podcasts like this where I get to share these ideas, and hopefully they inform others. And my goal, one of the core kind of, call it a thesis for me, was what are some fundamentals that I can bake into the culture that will have lasting and permanent effect. And one was that there's really two mindsets in business, in life, but we'll just talk about business for now. You're operating from one or the other at any given time, and one is the creative mindset, and the other is the competitive mindset. And the competitive mindset is coming from lack and limitation or fear. It's like there's only so many slices of pie. We have to fight over our slice of the pie. The other mindset, the creative mindset, says, forget fighting over a slice of pie. Let's go build an oven together and make as many pies as we want, hand them out to everybody, right? Like, it's just a different mindset. And so as you they say culture comes from the founders, and that's true, but only from the seed, like that genesis. It's just like you plant the seed. Culture is an evolution and effervescence of those that join, and if they're all in alignment on a core mission or belief structure, they're all going to add to that culture. So yeah, culture definitely comes from the founders and those early people, but they're really just planting those seeds. And then it's depending on everybody else to water them and see what they grow into. And so some of these concepts like that, creative versus competitive mindset, are a big deal. And reminding people in those given situations where they're operating from fear, that they're operating from that competitive mindset. Whereas if we're operating from, let's say, love or faith, and I know those are spiritual words, but they really do show up in business if you're paying attention, that's the creative mindset. Another kind of practice or concept that we have here is that we don't need to be the biggest company in our space. We don't even need to be the best at the current marketplace demand. We need to be so different and distinct as that we're an example for what's possible. So my goal has always been this, to be the spark that ignites the flame of change or paradigm shift or evolution in this space. And sometimes being a little bit smaller than the biggest allows you to be light on your feet and innovate and iterate and test new theories and concepts in the market that become the new norm or the new paradigm. And so we've intentionally stayed light on our feet, lean and mean. Now we've become a much bigger company than I even ever really imagined at the start of the company. But yet we've kept that mindset that is, we need to be the innovators. We need to challenge the status quo and push the limits. And some of our early days projects that people said were impossible to do it that way are now the new paradigm. Even at we're talking about the household name commercial real estate investment firms are now seeing it the way that we saw it, say, 8 years ago as what's possible. And so, that's important to us. And again, how do you maintain culture? Well, you have to hire people that believe in that mission. You have to hire people that are willing to put in the grit to do something different frequently, as opposed to just getting on a, kind of a rote, repeatable practice of what they do. So it's something that, grit is one of those terms that we use that people need to have. We used to articulate that a little bit differently, but in our hiring process, we're looking for people's grit. Do they have fortitude? Do they have that drive to want to challenge things and do things differently, but yet not different just for different sake, but use what's been learned in the past, both our past and previous to us as a company, and use that as a catapult into stretching for new ideas, new concepts, new protocols.
Yes, standing or building on the shoulders of giants that came before us. And I'm also a big fan of stealing ideas, what's working from other industries, and bringing it to your industry, your company. And one story that came to my mind was when I first came to the United States, I was working at Ritz-Carlton, local Ritz-Carlton here in Rancho Mirage. And I remember whenever you go to the Mensa or the place where you can have your lunch, there was a big whiteboard with the entire description of Ritz-Carlton culture, how you approach every guest from the moment they open the doors, or you open the doors for them. How do you approach them whenever they leave their room, whenever you encounter them? What are the words? They even go in depth, like how we articulate certain things in front of a customer. So that was always stuck with me, and that's how it starts. Obviously, it's Ritz-Carlton, when they hire thousands of people worldwide, they still have.
That's why the Ritz is the Ritz, man.
And that's why Ritz is the Ritz.
You get a similar experience to every Ritz-Carlton you go to, right? And that's because they hold that culture so dearly. Yeah,
they keep brewing across the world. You know what to expect essentially when you choose a Ritz-Carlton, and that's what you pay for. And that's that they're probably not the biggest, but when it comes to hotel industry, everyone knows what Ritz-Carlton is and what they stand for. So I remember it vividly. And one thing I remember I wanted to share with you, I know you're out of your recruiter's role, but maybe there's someone on your team that does it now, or unless you outsource. But I remember a story, either Warren Buffett or his partner, deceased partner, Charlie Munger, that one of their CEOs, whenever he wanted to hire someone for important, all of the roles are important, but bigger or executive role or non-executive role, he would arrange the meeting at a local restaurant, and he would go to the restaurant, arrive earlier, and tell the waiter to mess up the order, create chaos at the table, do something that would obviously cause a little bit of a stress type of environment. And he would sit there and observe how his candidates are responding in a simple situation like this. But obviously we all been in that situation when something happens, and how do we react? And that was showing them the true colors of that personality.
Absolutely.
And I love that.
I love that. It is so true. Integrity, that concept. Like, so if you put if you role play this and you say, okay, you've got one person who's really trying to impress Charlie Munger, and he's going to act like a big shot, or she's going to act like a big shot and boss the waiter around and complain about how they didn't do things right and play that ego. Really what Charlie Munger's looking for is, are you the kind of person that no matter how far up you are the food chain in the organization or in your level of importance or responsibility, how do you treat those below you? How do you treat the janitor? How do you treat the cleaning crew that comes to clean the office? Hugely important to me as well. I think you can tell a lot by a person and how they treat the, unhoused person on the street. I know you're going to kiss my butt as the CEO, That's not going to tell me much, right? How are you going to treat the guy that comes in to clean the office on a Friday afternoon? That tells me a lot more. And so, yeah, I think that's like, I've heard also stories of like back in my sales days of guys purposely giving the wrong address to a candidate and to see if they call and say, "Oh, I can't find the place. Can you tell me how to get there?" Or they have, and back before Google Maps, this was, you had to actually look on a real paper map.
I
Showing my
still
age here.
that place.
Yeah, yeah, and does that person have the ability to improvise and figure it out on their own? Because certainly you're going to have a hard time finding all of your clients' addresses if you need them to tell you exactly how to get there every time, and that's not what we're looking for. So yeah, there's little tricks like that, and I think it's really just at the end of the day, everybody's going to have their different methodologies and ways of identifying cultural fit, better than cultural fit, cultural evolution, with a given person joining the organization. And by the way, everybody matters. Don't ever think that some lower level role is not going to have an impact on the culture, because when it's not a good fit, it can really, like they say, the old saying, one bad apple can spoil the whole bunch. And that's really true. And so you've got to be very, very aware. And so you've got to, yes, I don't do all the hiring anymore, but my team now knows what it is that I always was looking for. And I've taught that into the team. And I've even built systems for understanding how to look for those things. And it's not a perfect science, it's more of just like, I've come to realize that even business for me, like in the bigger picture, it's less about, now I'm very proud of the work we do. And I'm very proud of the kind of the space that we're in as a company in the, clean energy transition, decentralizing power, in both literally and figuratively. But it's less about what we do as a company and more about why we do it. And so I'm always reflecting back to why. Why do we exist? Less about what we do. It's more, that's just a derivative effect of why we exist. We exist to create positive change, and that means that new technologies can come online that outmode what it is that we've been doing for 10 years. And that's okay with us because we're still able to execute on creating positive change in the way that we see it. So again, if you hold that heartbeat or that core, or that backbone, whatever term you want to use, near and dear, it will pay dividends in business. And I think it means that you're also operating from a strategy and getting less tied up in the tactics. The more are you on strategy? And again, that boils down to the why. I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek and his writing and his talks that he's done both in yeah, exactly. Start with why. And then again, he's gone deeper and deeper over time on that concept, but it's so fundamentally powerful.
Speaking of books, you've mentioned multiple authors down the road. I had a call today with a former NFL player, and he immediately, when it comes to pro athlete, I thought about this book, The Champion's Mind. I don't know if you can see it.
Oh yeah.
Great
Cool,
book,
man. I'm gonna jot that down.
I'm gonna reread it for the probably third time. Great stories from Jim Afremov, who was coaching many athletes, including multiple times gold medalists and people that obviously achieved a lot in a very high stress environment, which is pro athleticism and sports, multiple disciplines. So great book. I recommend it. I know you read a lot as well. Let's talk about innovations. Every time you open any social media platform, there is some AI things, AI that, there's automations, all of the crazy artificial world, virtual reality. How do you approach it? Do you implement anything into your companies or maybe for your clients, customers, the projects you supervise?
In the short answer on AI is yes, we should all be paying attention to AI, the good, bad, and the ugly. I think it'd be foolish to think that you will survive without at least understanding and looking for opportunities to utilize AI as a tool. It comes just like any new technology, right? There was probably a time that our great grandparents were sitting around arguing about whether or not television was going to be good or bad for people, right? And the truth is, all new technology has both a good light and a dark side, depending on how it's applied and how it's consumed and how it's utilized. The same goes with AI. I don't want to go too deep into how we're utilizing AI. Certainly, it's embedded in a lot of our ongoing system monitoring, where it's learning, weather patterns and nuances over time, and that's great. And then we're using it and helping to streamline the creation of reports, for socialization across the teams. It just saves time at the end of the day, and it's really powerful. However, I've already seen the negative effects of over reliance on AI. and the gaps that are still there. Maybe someday there won't be those gaps. As you probably can already tell, somebody that's more optimistic than pessimistic all of the time. And so I think that, yes, it's going to outmode some jobs out there. And what has happened every time a technology has outmoded jobs in the history of, industry is that those people have more time to go on and do more creative things, right? That'll boil down to that individual's mindset. Are they coming from the competitive mindset or the creative mindset? If they're coming from the competitive mindset, they're going to sit at home and be, head in their hands crying about how they don't have a job anymore. Others will say, wow, look, I have so much more time to go tap into that dream that I've always had, or that passion I've always had, and figure out how to turn that into a business, or join somebody else's team and bring that to them. So yeah, AI is great. Technology is always advancing. Certainly in the clean energy space, it's like a technology or a new application every day of the week. So keeping up with that is a lot of work, and making sure that we're vetting and testing before bringing to market new products and technologies. I'm a bigger fan of taking existing technologies that are tested and tried and tested and proven, and looking for different applications. So I think the real innovation for our company is taking an existing technology and the way it's being used and look at it, where could it be applied in the market in a different way for even greater outcome or benefit, or how could it be utilized in our model in a way that is different than maybe it's being sold in the market currently, but applies to us in a way that really adds a lot of value to us and our clients. So I like that. I'm a big fan of, letting the market roll out new tech, see how it's being utilized, but then look for opportunities to sometimes I'm having conversations with the technology inventors themselves and say, hey, have you ever considered using this in this way? And they go, we would have to tweak this or that to do that, but we love it. You're opening a whole new market for us if you were to do that. And that's fun for me. So yeah, I think that, at the same time that technology is evolving, at the same time that the tools are becoming more powerful, we're working in the energy space. On the other side of the equation, more and more energy is being used every minute. People don't realize every photo you store is stored, every photo you take on your phone is being stored somewhere, and that uses energy, right? And so we have this big...
We just uploaded, sorry to interrupt you, at least 5 gigabytes of content here into somewhere, clouds that I'll be
somewhere.
Somewhere.
Yeah. So we have we have a bit of an energy crisis here in the United States, and not so much as like, for the first year ever, solar surpassed, energy, and even beat out hydro, generation for leading the new generation of power. And we are heavily, utilizing solar as one of our technologies. But data centers are growing, and the need for storing and utilizing data is growing, and AI is the biggest driver of that. The amount of compute and therefore cooling and space and all the things that go into it that require energy, it's hard to keep up with. And so it's, yes, on the one hand, it's where do we get the energy? There's a number of great sources of energy generation now that aren't necessarily the old way. However, it's also about, the grid itself. And so I'm kind of on a personal mission to make sure that the grid doesn't fail here in California, along with millions of others. But, the idea that the grid was built for a certain level of infrastructure, which was fantastic and served its purpose when it was designed and developed and expanded over time. But it's becoming very fragile at this point. And so I think, the idea of decentralizing power into a more of a regional nodal network of, created, stored, distributed power is very important to make sure that the grid does not fail. The reason I make this is such an important topic is that I think people forget that if the grid fails, we saw this a little bit in Texas over the last, maybe it was a couple of years ago now, but when the grid fails, it's only a matter of days before chaos ensues, right? And then beyond that, you start to have some level of anarchy, and you start to see human behavior at its lowest form, which is, again, that competitive mindset of who can get the food first, who can get the water first. Things begin to get ugly quickly. So there's this big picture of are we generating and using energy in a way that's supporting the environment and the future generations and and the health of this planet. But there's also this short-term need, which is if we have true grid failure, there's death and destruction right around the corner from that. So for me, I like to align near-term actions with long-term outcomes, right? And so near-term is like, how do we make sure that this grid is not going to truly fail at some point, or begin to have, more and more incidental failure, while at the same time thinking big picture long-term, which is, thinking of the ecology, future generations.
What do you see as a potential support for the grid so we can prevent it from failing? Are we talking microgrids that
Yeah, I mean, we've implemented some large scale microgrids for California municipalities. We've pioneered some of the early microgrids for zero net electric, systems for industrial. So for large manufacturers that are almost 24/7 production, high energy use per square foot type of facilities. Fantastic, right? I think a lot of people don't realize that there's more than enough energy being put on the grid from solar in the middle of the day in California, more than we can even use. So the problem isn't so much that that we have enough energy; it's just when we have that energy. And so now storing energy in a sophisticated way is becoming more important than actually generating it. Right. So solar is a great thing. However, it is becoming less important in the big picture, and storing that energy and utilizing it at the right times is becoming more important, both for economics as well as grid hardening. And then there's, if we really go, still somewhat far out there, but maybe nearer future than I realize is, more of these kind of mini nuclear power plants where conceptually back, 50 years ago, 40 years ago, whatever we were conceptualizing of, nuclear power plants as being a centralized generator of power because they were so efficient, so powerful that why not let that be the center of generating power that then gets distributed out across a long distance. Now it's a little bit more being conceived of as a regional, these smaller, easier to implement, quicker to build, safer nuclear facilities that are feeding regional grid. I think that's almost a necessity at this point. So long duration energy storage, things like molten salt batteries, solid state batteries. And then of course we have the variations on a theme of lithium. So stored energy is becoming incredibly important. And then constant, solid, predictable, and safe generation that comes from nuclear is also, I think, part of the conversation. I'm not necessarily going to purport to be an expert on that technology or how it would be implemented, but I do know that is something to keep up with the demand that's coming along with AI. It's probably going to be a necessity.
One thing is clear and certain as well. We're not going to stop the electrification of things. That's not going to happen. Like you said, this would cause quite fast, quickly chaos all around. So that's not going to happen. So I guess we need more people to join. I don't want to call it a revolution, just a movement and advancement on what we've built so far. I mean, the fragile grid instability has been in talks for many, many, many years. And I feel like it's a worldwide crisis.
It is, yeah.
We all have to approach. And if we do it together, I think we can definitely make a safe future for the future generations if we can do that way. And it's a great conversation when 44 minutes goes by like 4 minutes. So let's wrap up slowly here. It's still middle of the day for you. Question that I have for you is that I ask most of the guests, if not all of the guests. You are presented an opportunity to sit across the table from younger Derek. What advice do you have for him?
What a great question. Man, what a great question. Well, I'm going to get a little esoteric here, but it's true. It's the truth. I think what I would tell younger Derek, maybe I'll give a little context before I answer. The context is this. I was undiagnosed dyslexic ADHD when I was young. At the time, there wasn't a lot of, they thought of dyslexia as just transposing letters. I taught myself how to read well and read really fast. It wasn't the challenge for me. It was more that I'm a right-brained thinker as opposed to a left-brain thinker. Society and, early education is all geared for left hemispherical thinking. And so I started out with a lot of challenges, right? I didn't fit in the normal school process, which led to challenges at home with my parents, which led to behavioral issues, which led to not knowing my place in the world and what was that going to look like. And over time, through listening and reading to the right things, I began to see that I had value and that I just needed to be true to myself. I think if I were to go back in time and tell myself anything, I would remind myself that I am enough, that I am perfect as I am, and that all I need to do is look at what it is that my heart really wants, which was some version of helping people get what they want, some version of positive change, some version of spreading of love, However, at points in my life, I looked like an angry rebel, and so that didn't show up, and so I think I would go back and tell myself that I'm more than enough as I am, I'm perfect as I am, and just to double down on my strengths. And if I would have done that a little earlier, I think I would have saved myself a lot of heartache, and I'd probably be a little bit further along in my mission. Now, that said, I'm also one of those people who believes that everything happens for a reason. And as I look back, I needed those challenges in order to have the grit that was required to start this company and lead the way I do. So Yeah, I think I would also tell myself to shut up and listen a little bit more. You know, there's so much wisdom around us from everyone and everything all the time, and as we're young, and especially if we think we have a fight to fight, we're not necessarily paying enough attention. So I had to learn things on the hard way a lot of the time, and I think that I probably could have also saved some time and headache if I would have just paid a little bit more attention to, like you said, spend a little bit more time standing on the shoulders of giants that came before us.
One phrase that came to mind as you were talking about the first part is in Latin, satis sum et digna. I am enough and worthy. That's a good
It's a
phrase
good
for
one. That's a good one. I'm covered in tattoos. That would have been a good tattoo. Um, yeah, we are all imbued with the greatness of God or creator or source or whatever term you want to use. And we're all 100% equally valuable and necessary in each of our own ways. And I think the more people move from operating from a place of fear to a place of faith or
yeah.
love, the more we will see that collaborative and synergistic effect of good, positive outcomes. And I think, you know, as I look back and go, what can we do different with our children as a species to maybe further that a little bit? And every time I go down that road, I come to realize it's just the way it is. We all come up a certain way with certain challenges and certain fears and inadequacies, and it's our job. It's just, this life is meant to be a lesson so that someday we can get to a point of understanding that allows us to do our best work and live into our purpose. However, it does lean into the idea that we as a culture, maybe globally, but certainly here in America, don't have enough respect for our elders and their wisdom and their experience. And I think other cultures, and certainly ancient cultures, had a lot more respect or honor for their elders. And you know, those simple little things that grandpa used to tell us that went in one ear and out the other, you know, I really wish I would have paid more attention to, because they were based in so much life experience.
No, another phrase comes to mind. Love your fate, fati. That's always a good reminder there. And you speaking about respect for elderly, I 100% agree. I mean, I was still blessed to grow up around the generation that had to literally fight for survival and for
Remind me
freedom.
where you're from. Where you're from?
From Poland. I was born
Poland.
in
That's right. Yeah.
Poland. Yes.
Tough, man. Tough story in Poland. Great to see Poland evolve to what it is becoming now. You know, I think from what I understand. But yeah, that's a lot of war and challenge there. And
We
yeah.
disappeared for 123 years. We're non-existent, and I still speak Polish. We still are on a map, and it looks like our economy is growing fast. I love
Yes.
seeing
Do
that.
you think that that historical narrative that you heard passed down from generation has an impact on that grittiness and that? I mean, the Polish people I know are just tough, smart, industrious people. Do you think that that's just that near, you know, kind of near recent historical narrative has been impactful for you?
It's a great question there. And I will repeat what you just said. The things that happen to us happen for a reason. This happenings and all the things, wars, obviously, and all the difficult scenarios growing up for previous generations, that if that didn't took place, we wouldn't be as tough as we are, or as we try to portray ourselves there. But it is. I know that people in Poland are hard to break for sure, and mentally and physically, maybe more physically than mentally, because that Slavic blood is it's there,
Yep.
always
Yep.
shows up. And so that will be my answer as far as for me personally. And I feel like the future generation, that's the first generation that I've observed that it slowly fades away. So I hope it's not going to happen, because there's this picture or set of pictures where they say that tough times create tough men create good times create weak men. And I feel like the circle. I don't feel I
Look at America, my friend. I mean,
yeah,
look what's going on here.
and yeah, America is the same thing. Everything that happens in America happens in Europe like 6 months or 12 months later. That's how usually it is. It plays out sometimes the other way around, but most of the times it's America first. So yeah, that's what's happening. And I feel like we still have an opportunity, because those generations that were dealing with those tough times, that the new generations has no idea what to expect, and they would probably not survive these times with their current mindset, right? This generation is still there. So I would encourage everyone to, like you said, shut up and listen to people that came before you and had a little bit harder times than just not having internet for a day or two to deal with situations. I mean, it's mind blowing. I'm firsthand, like my grandma, who just passed away 2 months ago. So just recently, she had to evacuate because that night there was certain organizations going around and killing everyone in the village, burning
Yeah.
houses, kids,
Yeah.
babies,
Yeah.
and well, I mean, you can't even imagine that nowadays.
No.
Like a movie, it's
No.
like a horror movie, the
No.
worst nightmare.
Totally.
And
Totally.
they got a signal that they had to leave, so they grabbed whatever they could and they moved west. That was a situation that happened, with just two generations before me. So
Yeah.
it's and I heard so many stories growing up. So that definitely shaped me. The others, on the other, I grew up in a fixed mindset household. My dad was entrepreneurial, tried a lot of different things before he passed away, and I joined his company at the age of 14 to work every weekend, all vacations. My friends were going somewhere,
Yeah.
I was working.
I know that one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that was the thing that definitely shaped who I am right now, and I'm thankful for this. It wasn't easy for sure, but I'm very thankful.
I'll take a couple minutes to give you a real life example for me. So my sons have so much more than my wife or I did growing up, right? So much more opportunity, so much more of material things and wealth and abundance, right? And so at one point we stopped ourselves and said we worked so hard to create something that we believed in that now has allowed some level of affluence and comfortability for us as a family. How do we make sure we didn't screw up our kids? So how do we make sure they're not spoiled brats or entitled, weaklings, right? Mentally. And the only thing I could come up with was that we're leading by example. So they see us work hard, for one, even though there's a lot a lot of benefit that comes along with that. They still see us work hard. Two, that they need to work, regardless of the fact that we have a certain level of abundance, that they still need to work to be a part of that, right? And so we never gave them anything. If they wanted something new that we could easily afford, we made them put in the work to gain it. And then three, that they see us operate from a place of love, first and foremost, always operating from love, and less about the that kind of consumer mindset, right? More of like, what's the right thing to do? How do we share our wealth and abundance with others? Like, how do we provide benefit for others, so that it's not just that we're accumulating for us, but it's so that we can give back and give away or share. And it's funny. My son is 17 years old. He'll be a senior in high school this year. And this summer, he said, Dad, I don't know. Same thing. I realize at his age, I don't know if I can sit in another 4 years. And he gets great grades, and he's got colleges recruiting him for he's a really good volleyball player. And he said, I just don't know if I can do it. And he said, I think I want to go learn how to work, add value and work with my hands. Can I join one of the company's crews this summer and work alongside the guys and learn something learn a trade, learn how to be an electrician? And I was like, are you kidding me? I mean, our guys are working in the middle of, Central California, 110 degrees outside, on a rooftop, it's tough work. And I said, all right, go for it. Try it. And I thought for sure I was going to get a call a week or two in, he's going out of town and staying in a hotel by himself,
Wow.
working on this crew with a bunch of grown men. And I thought I'm going to get a call where he's like, yeah, this is too much. I'm not cut out for this. And no, every time I talk to him on the phone, he's like, I love it. This is great. I'm learning a lot. And then I talk to the guys, the leaders on the crews, and they're like, no, he's keeping up. He's working hard. And I'm reminding them, no special treatment for my kid. Just treat him like anybody else. And he's doing it. And so that's evidence to me that the things that we did to show them work ethic, to show them that things don't come easy, show them that you have to share what it is that you gain with others, and that you've got to do things that are beyond what's good for you, but good for as many people as possible whenever you make a decision. That's playing out. So I think that there's a way, to your saying, hard times create hard men, and hard men create good times, and good times create weak men. I think good times can create good men, good people, right? If we do it right. And so I think we're in the good times here in America. And how do we create good people? And then therefore good people create more good times, create more good people, create more good times, right? We've got to find a way to shift that. And again, it goes back to that mindset of collaborative and creative versus competitive.
And as a new parent, I'll definitely take your advice to heart, because that's what we are actively talking about and thinking about. And the last thing I wanted to do or be is that parent that tells his kid not to use his iPad, but then the next moment he's grabbing his iPad
Yeah.
and he's logged in on
Yeah.
the device or social media or what have you, and not present at all. I don't want to be that parent. If I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do it with my kid. So
be the example, right? Yeah. Be the change you want to see in the world. Be the example. And so, are you using your iPad to educate yourself or to share brilliant ideas like you are with your work with others? And maybe that'll inspire your child to do the same thing, as opposed to just social media or video games or whatever it is.
Absolutely. It seems like she's already liking the camera, so we'll see.
How old is she? I imagine she's good in front of the camera. Looking at you, you probably were or could have been a model. So I'm assuming that she's gonna love the camera as much. How old is she now?
7 months. Yeah.
Fun
So
times, fun
yeah,
times. That the saying, the one saying that I heard that actually made sense to me, and really more so over time, was the days are long, but the years are short.
yeah,
It's
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 true.
tough to appreciate each stage of their growth because it's so hard when they're young, but it goes by quick,
I know it flies so fast, and I hate it.
and only more so over time. It's like when I look back at my son's a year away from probably moving out of the house, I'm like, that seems like. But when I was busy changing diapers in the middle of the night, while working two jobs, it wasn't going by quickly.
I know.
But it does go by fast. Enjoy it.
Yeah.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
big blessing. It's the most fulfilling thing that could ever happen
Oh, it
to.
is. It changes everything, right? You see the world totally differently overnight. Yeah.
Yeah, it was so many great memories and moments already, and I love every second of it. And it's just you can't describe it unless you go through it. So now having huge much more respect for all the parents out there with kids. Definitely more than if you have more than two kids. That's I mean I can't even imagine how they manage.
Do you
How
want
they
to have more than one?
Yeah, more than one for sure. Not I'm not going to we're not expecting to be crazy with like 5 6 kids. Or I heard I connect with someone with 8 kids recently. I mean, how?
No, thanks.
Definitely more
No,
than one
thanks.
for sure.
I would. We had Irish twins, 17 months apart, and it played out really, really well. It was really cool. It was very, very difficult when they were both toddlers, at the same time. But they're very close, and it's been a lot of fun that way. I tell people it's easy to say let's wait because it's so hard right now, but it gets easier if you have them, 2 years apart.
Yeah, that's probably it. I mean, my brother is 14 years older. My sister's 18 years older. So I would
Yeah, you
tell
know,
it's different. It was cool later on because I could travel and visit, and I would
yeah,
spend, one vacation with my sister. My brother would take me places. But it was when I was like growing up, the first couple of years, I didn't have siblings, and that was kind of like very boring in the house.
yeah,
So
yeah,
for me,
yeah,
especially, I was lucky to have some friends close by, but it's still not the same as siblings. I feel like that's a good difference. I'll definitely not wait 14 years.
yeah, yeah.
Definitely. But Derek, hey, it was a great conversation. We're just crossed an hour, and it was so insightful, so fun to listen to your story, what you've accomplished over those past decades. And I didn't know actually that you went from working with your dad, being the glass expert, to energy efficiency buildings and then leading big projects. So I look forward to seeing what the future will bring. We'll keep it optimistic as always. I look forward to seeing your content on the YouTube channel as well. And yeah, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Matt. It's been a pleasure. Really, really enjoyed the time as well.